Good evening. Welcome to this edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics. My name is Dean Becker. We have our co-host, Mr. Clay Jones, here with us. And our guest, I'll let him introduce himself. Your name,
Hi.
What do you do, sir?
Yes, my name is Robert Knapick. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Been working in the field of substance abuse for over 30 years. I also have a program here at Houston Media Source called Scuba Bob's Ocean Quest.
So Scuba Bob it is. That's what we'll call it.
That's perfectly fine.
So a much easier name. Now, you talk about being a therapist, counseling people with problems in life, right?
That is correct.
Helping them get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about maybe those you've encountered that had a problem with drugs. You know, I hear that the drug czar touts the fact that 60 to 70% of those sent for treatment are there for marijuana. Are those your clients as well?
That fair percentage of the people I see have used marijuana and are currently using.
Right. Now, I think Clay and I might wonder about that. We've known hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have used a lot of cannabis, and very few of them have had problems, at least revolving around the cannabis, that needed treatment.
I know. I got a friend just stopped the other day because he said it's about time.
Just about time.
Yeah, it's time to just lay off for a while.
Well, and I understand that. I've laid off for a while myself. I think, you know, moderation is probably the key to most any drug use, though, isn't it?
Sure.
Right? Well, tell us about some of those problems you run into, those with drug problems, maybe not necessarily with cannabis.
Right. Well, I began working in the field with heroin addicts through a methadone program. Worked there for about 2 years. Again, that's a different type of drug than a marijuana or more of the recreational drug. It's a pretty serious drug, and has a very high addiction status, and especially causes a lot of physical withdrawals.
But, Bob, I got to ask you. Go back 120 years. Heroin was on the drugstore shelf, along with cocaine, along with marijuana, along with crystal meth, or everything else. It was right there. People worked and survived back then when it wasn't against the law. What's the difference? Is it the black market?
Is it today's hectic society?
Well, there's a lot of issues here, in that one, most all drugs that we talk about, everything from your cocaines to your marijuana to your amphetamines to your downers, things of that nature, they've got medical purposes. And the problem is, whenever you take that drug and you push it to the point where you begin to abuse it, and you begin to using it what it's not for. Yeah. Example, you know, the Aztec Indians used the cocaine, the coca leaves, chewed it and everything. Coca-Cola.
That's not cocaine.
No, but it's where cocaine comes from.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it does have that high experience as far as giving them energy so that they can work in altitudes and things like that. So again, that's the issue there, is that the drugs are used for, there's purpose for them. The narcotics for pain and things of that nature. So I think the key here is that we need to understand that the use of drugs in moderation, or like alcohol, for example, is going to be fine. You know, drinking wine with your meal or something of that nature. Whenever you're drinking a case, then a night, then that becomes a problem.
Sure. Bob, I wanted to throw in the thought that the drug czar of these United States, he's been making the rounds, talking about a more humane, we don't need to call it a drug war anymore. It's, you know, he's trying to negate the perception of it all. And I guess what he says more and more these days is that it is a medical problem. It needs to be treated as a medical problem. And the fact of the matter is that they have not stopped spending to treat it as a criminal problem, to treat it as a jail problem, to treat it as, you know, lock them up problem. And to tie into this, he talks about drug use and drug abuse as if they are one and the same. And the truth be told, there is a huge line of difference, right?
Right. Well, first of all, in the past 10 years, there's been a lot of wonderful research done on chemical addiction and dependency. And what we found is that the drugs are affecting the midbrain, the middle part of the brain, which is basically the drives, the hunger drives, the thirst drives, and things of that nature. And if you stimulate it with certain drugs or overly stimulated, that becomes the one drive in your life to do, and you can't stop. And so now, hopefully, and this is what we want, is the criminal justice system will begin looking at not the behavior, but more the biology, the chemical, the medical aspects of this.
But we'll be taking it out of the criminal justice system, and they got to have reason to have all these police on the road.
Right, and that's where the criminalization becomes, you're not really helping the individuals.
No.
There's a movie called Drunk in Public, and it's about an individual that's been arrested over 500 times for public intoxication. Wow. And this is where the drug becomes a problem, is whenever it overrides your common sense, and whenever the brain is stimulated in the midbrain, it secretes another brain chemical that begins to stop the frontal lobe ability of logic. And so here we have people that begin losing their jobs, losing their family, losing their lives over a chemical substance. Yeah. And so that's when it becomes the problem. And it needs to be treated medically. In fact, now they're beginning to do a lot of brain mapping to deal with chemical dependency.
But like I was trying to say a minute ago, back that 100 years ago when heroin was legal, it wasn't a problem. It didn't become illegal because it was a problem.
Right.
It became illegal because we wanted these damn Chinese guys that just finished with the railroad. We didn't want them anymore, so let's send them back. They can't get their opium.
Right.
They're not going to be happy here.
Right. Well, an example of this would be the whole issue of alcohol. Whenever we had prohibition was not started by some ladies that wanted to stop men from drinking or people from drinking alcohol. It was stopped because of Rockefeller, who wanted Henry Ford to use gasoline and not alcohol to fuel his cars. And so what Rockefeller did was he gave $2 million to the temperance movement, and that's why we had a series of around 13 years of no alcohol or illegal alcohol in the United States.
There was 5 states that didn't pass.
That's right.
I was wanting to back up here a minute to talk about the behaviors
Yes.
Of a drug-using individual. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the perception of time wasted, it comes from the prohibition scenario. A lot of it does. And that is, 1, they have to find money, either rob, steal, borrow,
Yes.
whatever they're going to do. 2, they've got to locate drugs. 3, they've got to battle their co-purchasers. For that, it tends to be a frenzy to make use of the drugs they just purchased, which, leads to
Criminal behavior.
Criminal behavior, so all around. And I guess what I'm saying is, much of the problem that's defined as drug-related is really prohibition-related.
Yes. Well, in fact, my master's thesis was on heroin addiction and employment. And what I did was I investigated the mores, or the rights and wrongs of the drug culture versus the straight culture. And again, the drug culture is something you can join into just like that by either lighting up, taking a pill, or drinking something. You become a member of that society. And we get a lot of individuals who maybe have, and I've worked a lot with adolescents, and they might have a ADHD or maybe shy or whatever. So what happens is they quickly identify with this drug group.
Right.
And
they accept them.
And they're accepted immediately, and it's okay to lie, cheat, steal, and all the other things. And so it's easy to follow those rules, especially going through adolescence. And my hypothesis is we need to have activities and programs that we get these kids involved in doing very successful things. I had a private school for delinquent kids, and it was one of the juvenile justice alternative education programs, the schools. And these kids were expelled from schools for beating kids up, putting holes in walls, using drugs, and all of this type of stuff. They came to my school. I focused on success. I focused on showing them that we will try to be successful at other things besides failing, which is very easy to do. So what ended up happening was I took them to radio stations so they could see what that meant. I put them in front of mechanics. One of my kids worked for A.J. Foyt's pit crew on auto mechanics. He's now an aerospace engineer for NASA. I have nurses, I have EMTs, I've got mechanics, I've got all different, everybody that graduated from my school went on to a higher level of education. And that's what we want to do, is we want to instill that success. And we talk about that brain issue with the drugs. Whenever you are successful, you secrete the chemicals in the brain that make you feel good, the endorphins and everything, the serotonins. Sure. So you're excited, and all of a sudden this outweighs the abuse to where you now are being able to function effectively in society, become positive, and become a role model.
Clay said something a while ago. I wanted to touch on that. You were talking about 100 years ago. Bayer heroin sold up there on the grocery shelf next to Bayer aspirin. And I want to submit that it was at the very same price. And so therefore it is that black market escalating prices 100, 1,000 times more than it would at a retail venue that causes much of that crime, that societal deviation.
Right. And I believe that if we did end up legalizing marijuana and all of that, the cartel that's down on our border, which is becoming a horrible thing because it's destroying our relationship with Mexico, and it's just, people are afraid to go there. We would turn these individuals from carrying assault rifles to carrying briefcase and wearing three-piece suits, because they would be making a lot of money in a legal way. We would end up getting tax dollars from it, and it would be used, and it would be moderated so that the abuse would be cut down, because now it's going to have to be taxed, it's going to have to be overseen, and it's going to be, in many cases, medically given out.
Sure. And I hope it is. I mean, it would be so much better. The cannabis industry has tried their best to provide for testing of samples, to look for mold and mildew and whatever else, to determine the THC and the CBD quantity, to make that known to the purchaser so they can make a more, intelligent decision. It's not per dictates of government. This is just the industry itself that has tried to do that. And yet, Clay and I were talking a little earlier about the fact that in California now, they're coming down hard and heavy on dispensaries all over the place. They're saying these people have too much money in their dresser drawer or whatever, when the truth be told, the banks no longer accept their money. They can no longer get a bank account, so what else are they supposed to do? But the cops are saying that makes them look even more criminal. They have all this money in their homes. It's such a situation, We have here in Texas a law on the books that's basically a decrim bill. It says you don't have to be arrested, you don't have to go to jail. They write you a ticket. I think it's a $250 fine, if I remember right.
I don't remember that part of it, but I remembered you had to be in court within 3 days of the time you got that citation. You had to have ties to your community. You had to have a job in town, a home in town, go to school in town.
Have a tie to that town.
Have a tie to that county.
Yeah.
And as long as you met those criteria, it was fine and well to give you a citation. That was enacted in what, 07?
Yeah, it's been 5 years now.
5 years now, and Pat Lykos, she didn't want to make confusion.
Well, now, she's not alone, though. There's only one district attorney in the whole state of Texas that makes use of that law.
Yes, but she's the one that I live under, so she's the one that I have to look at.
Yeah. We have a situation now. You probably, Bob, meet some folks that are pretty well down in their luck. We'll touch on that here in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and take a break. You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics. I'm Dean Becker. We got Clayton Jones, and
Robert
Scuba
Knapick,
Bob.
the Scuba Bob.
Scuba Bob, we'll be back here in just a minute.
We have a section on the decriminalization of marijuana. I think the first sentence I'm going to read you is very important. That decriminalization of marijuana does not mean we endorse marijuana use, but it's only a call for wiser law enforcement and public health policy. Noting that the prohibition of marijuana is advocating control of that production and distribution to drug cartels and street gangs that are harmful to our society.
You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
Utah's laws on marijuana?
Oh, we're back.
Misdemeanor
All right.
for
We're
a
back.
pound.
All right. This is Drugs, Crime, Politics. I'm Dean. This is Clay and Bob. Bob, we're talking about the drug war and its impact on our citizens and how I say the prohibition drives more people to treatment than the drugs do, but it can be a big problem. It can curtail that family's growth,
Oh, yes.
ability to function, right?
Right. In fact, that's what made me become a family therapist, was because when I worked with the heroin addicts, I found out it was not just the individual's problem, but it was the entire family's problem.
Right.
And that's what needs to be dealt with, is to understand it's a system problem. It doesn't impact that one individual.
Right. Well, no, it branches out of that house. It
Exactly.
involves the neighborhood
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, it can be quite a problem. Now, I have been to TIRR, I think
Yeah,
it is.
TIR.
A gentleman there apparently had done, this was many decades ago when I think about it, but I was told he did too much LSD.
Okay.
He was rather trippy the day I got there, a week after he got committed. Non sequiturs, things did not flow. The discussion did not make sense. And I admit I never saw the gentleman again, never heard anything more. But that seemed like such an aberration. Is there sometimes more involved than just the use of that drug, a prior schizoid personality, or what do you think?
Well, I spent 10 years working in emergency rooms dealing with overdoses and things of that nature. And one of the things that I discovered was that a lot of people that began using a lot of the hallucinogenics would actually trigger things. They may have had a predisposition to schizophrenia. And whenever they begin using some of those drugs, it pushes them into the point where now they're going to have to be treated for schizophrenia the rest of their life.
Right.
And so that is very important to understand.
Now,
I've always found that trip was a lot of fun.
it,
It made greens greener, jokes funnier,
Yeah.
conversations more interesting.
I don't want to get into the pros and cons too much, other than to say there are pros and cons. The sad thing, I guess, is we use a sledgehammer to swat a mosquito.
Exactly.
And that's the real problem, isn't it, Bob?
Right. I think that we do have a problem in that we're not doing any type of treatment, and more money needs to be put into treatment, I think, than into the prison systems. If you take a look at the people that are in the prison systems, a majority are there because of drug-related crimes or while they were under the influence. Yep. And we're needing to treat them And in my years of experience working with people, it's more than just talk therapy. It has to be something where there's action. There has to be things where we're showing these people how they can be a successful product of our society.
Well, going back to something that happened 12 years ago, Portugal decriminalized everything. And they have injection centers. And they have something like 40% less heroin addicts today than they did 12 years ago.
Right.
People are given good information at these injection centers. If the person says they want rehabilitation, they want to stop all this, it's immediate.
Right.
And they get to go and they're in-house treatment. And Portugal is fighting that demon down there that they had a horrible problem with the black market. And it's not as big a problem as it was when everybody said it was just they were going to go to hell in a handbasket when they decrimmed everything.
Right. And again, I think that's something that we do need to look at as far as how do we treat individuals? What do we do? When I was involved with the methadone clinics, the goal there was to get people off of the methadone, and we had very few success stories, but we did have some. And today, it's more of a maintenance program, and people are in a very, very high dosage of it. And methadone is actually a higher addictive substance than the actual heroin that they're trying to get off of.
Right.
It's just that they control where the
Right.
profits go with methadone. They don't with heroin.
And in the 80s, England used actual heroin to get people off or do a maintenance dose for them. And whenever you look at the fact that the average heroin addict's daily addiction is $150, $200 a day,
Black market prices.
black market prices, they have to steal 10 times the amount of product, PVs and things like that to support that daily habit. And you figure that maybe 5% of the population are heroin addicts. You're talking 20, 30,000 people a day spending, millions of money and stealing it. And so then it becomes a criminal problem as opposed to something where we're dealing with treatment.
I don't like addiction, but it seems to me that we could lick that problem by legalizing it. And if a person worked 30 hours this week, next week they get their heroin daily at injection centers for $2 a day.
Yeah, well, it doesn't cost much. I know that in Afghanistan, where the Taliban and dang near everybody's growing opium, it costs about 6 cents a gram. It takes 10 grams to make a gram of heroin.
Right.
So it would cost about 60 cents worth of opium to make a gram of heroin, which is a huge supply for pure heroin, more than a week's worth, I would think, for most addicts.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yet the country of Switzerland, they haven't legalized marijuana, but they have legalized heroin, which tells you something about the pragmatic mindset of those folks. That they had a vote 2 years ago. At the same time, they were going to vote on legal weed, going to vote on legal heroin. The weed didn't quite make it. The heroin got it by a strong endorsement. So they have apparently studied this a lot longer, more thoroughly than we have. What, you want to do some news, Clay?
Yeah, well, let's get started about what's happened here in our country. In Louisiana, a few months ago, or last year actually, there was a young man, 24 years old, who was selling marijuana and LSD to a couple of the college campuses. He got found out, he faked his death, and the feds got a hold of him, found him, and they said to him, "Oh, by the way, where'd you get your stuff from? Your marijuana and your acid?" He wouldn't tell them. For selling marijuana and acid, he is sentenced to 3 life terms.
Lordy. He's 20-something years old.
24 years old. And the judge, after the case, said that the sentence was just way out of proportion for what he did. That's your mandatory minimums.
Oh, that's a mandatory minimum.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank 86 U.S. legislature for that one.
Then in where was it? Nicaragua. The DEA was doing some kind of a searching out drug people.
Yep.
And they found these people in a boat going down the river, and they shot them from the helicopter. And unfortunately ended up being civilians. They killed 2 pregnant women, 10 wounded, and there's 3 children missing. That's trying to do interdiction.
Well, we had a situation in Peru. It's been a few years back where an even more glaring example of this DEA enforcement. I think her name was Melanie Bowers. Her husband was a minister.
Yes.
They're flying in an airplane,
Yep.
and the Peruvian Air Force zoomed in, said they tried to radio him, talk to him. Apparently they were on the wrong frequency. They contacted the U.S. headquarters. The U.S. said, shoot them down, and they did. They shot down this plane, killed, as I recall, the wife was holding a baby, and the bullet went through her and the baby, and the plane crashed, and lives were lost.
It's out of control. It's time to end the drug war. It's just people are dying that shouldn't be dying.
Yeah. Well, there's been a situation developed in just the last week. Announcement came out from the Drug Policy Alliance that they're joining forces with a lot of other organizations, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, the NAACP, a couple of other organizations, as well as Javier Cecilla, the noted Mexican poet. His son was killed last year by cartel forces. He sponsored 2 caravans, if you will, from South Mexico to Mexico City, and then I think from Mexico City up to Ciudad Juarez or Laredo. And they're going to do a caravan here in America. I think it's 6,000 miles they have planned. What is it, August 12th to September 10th. They're going to start in San Diego, go to Los Angeles, around California, Tucson, Phoenix, El Paso, San Antonio, Austin, Houston,
Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas, New Orleans, Mobile, jump up to Chicago, then down around through the New England area, and as I said, end up in Washington, D.C. on September 10th.
Well, you know, this is no longer the third rail.
No.
Politicians are not getting voted out because they mention drugs. The ones that are standing behind getting rid of this drug war seem to be doing pretty well.
Doing just fine. We had a classic example, our last election here. Yeah, during the primary, Beto O'Rourke, former city councilman, city of El Paso, was elected by saying he wants to work towards ending the harms of drug prohibition. And we've had, well, the U.S. attorney that convicted Mark Emery has now come out for ending marijuana prohibition.
Yeah.
We had the situation just, well, last Friday, I think it was, Rahm Emanuel came out for a decrim of marijuana, same as Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Cuomo have done.
And Connecticut signed in the law.
And Mayor Parker, you can make a change. We have a law right here in Texas, if we would just make use of it, that says it's no longer necessary to arrest or jail anybody for weed, write them a ticket, they show up in court, pay their fine.
That's up to a quarter pound.
Well, and up to a quarter pound. What did I say? But anyway, yeah, 4 ounces, a big old bag, y'all. More than you want to have in your car, I'll tell you that.
Incarceration rates in our country has gone up by 78.9% since 1990. Federal prisons have increased 212% in the last 20 years.
Well, either we all got a lot more evil or perceptions got distorted. Which one do you think it is?
I think that there's too many people making money on incarcerations and arrests. Whether it's that lousy package of mustard you get with the stale bread and bologna sandwich, or that apple. No matter what it is, somebody is making money on it, and people don't want to change.
All right. Well, once again, you're watching Drugs, Crime, Politics. I'm Dean Becker. This is Clay. This is Scuba Bob here with us. We'll be back in just a minute. We're going to talk a little bit more about treatment, addiction, and, well, your family maybe. We've all got a problem, child, don't we? We'll be right back.
The whole idea of a drug-free America and zero tolerance really doesn't make much sense, does it? So it does make sense, however, to find ways to reduce the harms associated with drugs. And that's what I want to talk about.
Better start thinking about whether it is really laws that make the difference on whether people use drugs or not.
Al Capone didn't shoot people because he was intoxicated.
Right, exactly.
Those people are not fighting over drugs, they're fighting over money.
Drug laws have no basis in science. Drug laws are based on politics and money.
So there's this unholy symbiosis between, on the one hand, those who are selling illegal drugs, the drug lords, if you will, and on the other side, the drug warriors.
War on drugs isn't working, and that, if anything, is just making what we call the drug problem a lot worse.
About 60+% of the marijuana use in this country is clearly in Anglo communities, in white communities. But if you look at the rate of arrest, you end up realizing that 10% of the people end up accounting for 35% of the rest. If you look at the prosecution, then we end up representing about 47% of those who get prosecuted. If you look at convictions, we end up being close to 60% of those who get convicted. If you look at those who end up being incarcerated, you end up being about 72%. So you go from being 10% of the population to being 72% of the people who are being incarcerated. I call it that there is a criminal industrial complex that has learned how to mine black gold.
If you're absolutely sick of being mistreated and you're tired of being blamed for what your society is wrong, support Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
All right. Gentleman's face you just saw, that was Mr. Ray Hill, my mentor, the guy who gave me my first time on the air here at KPFT. By the way, I'd like to point out got a great show lined up for you this coming Sunday night, 6:30 p.m. We're going to be interviewing Mr. J.R. Hinton. He's written a book, Cornbread Mafia. Tells the story of about 70 Kentucky farmers that were growing, well, I think he said 90 tons of weed one year. And then they started getting busted. But the cool thing about it is none of them ever squealed. Better record than the Sicilian Mafia. Weed growers, good people. Okay. We're wanting to talk about the need for looking at the dollars involved, the amount of money that's invested into treatment and trying to control people's minds and lives. Right, Bob? You want to
That's right.
Fill us in a bit?
Well, first of all, whenever you're talking about people who are using drugs, children, teenagers that are using drugs, we need to do treatment. Treatment. I've got a program that's as low as $3,000 for a full year of treatment, getting the kids involved in a Boy Scouts of America venturing program where they're actually going out learning how to camp, learning how to experience life. They also can learn things like learning how to scuba dive. I've taken 30 kids to Belize, had their lives entirely changed after a trip like that. Gave them a chance to see something new. We can do something like that, or we can spend around $32,000 a year to put somebody in prison. And that's what it costs for each inmate that we have that's been arrested and they go to prison. And when you do that, they're basically marked for life. As far as success for them is going to be very limited because wherever they go, that record is going to follow them.
Right.
You reach back 25, 30 years ago.
Yes.
The number one, maybe other than oil and gas, the number one industry in Texas was education.
Yes.
But now it's prisons, folks. It is prisons by far. And the schools are hurting, the tuition's rising, the parents are hurting trying to meet those obligations. We have, I think, squandered where we put our dollars, where we wanted to invest in the, quote, future. And we've invested in prisons rather than education.
That's right. And I think education is going to be the answer. If we take a look at our problems dealing with kids with drug problems, education is what we need to do. And we need to get kids motivated to do other things than the drugs, giving parents the tools to become parents, which is very important. But again, we put more money into the police to have, the police are having to spend too much time stopping kids from stealing and things of that nature, as opposed to doing what they need to do.
You know, Bob, since 9/11, September of 2001, America has become very afraid.
Yes.
It has become fraidy cats, if you will. And we've had the situation where we've invested untold tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars into all kinds of security measures at airports and, cargo containers and on down the line. But it hasn't quelled the fear, so to speak. America has, I think, been clinging to the idea that we're susceptible, that we've got to be ever vigilant and spend whatever it takes. And it is that same mindset that I think started with the drug war, that no matter what it takes, we're going to stop the flow of drugs. We're going to overcome the law of supply and demand. And it stems from a deep-seated fear. Is that the lizard part of the brain?
Yes, that's right, the midbrain.
Midbrain, yeah.
But look at what we're doing. What we're doing. What law enforcement has done. They're in California going nuts with the dispensaries.
This is true.
They're saying that figures don't line up. They got too much cash. Well, they can't put it anywhere.
The banks will not open an account for them.
Right. In Montana, all the people that had the dispensaries up there, or the professional grows, they're all going to prison.
Yeah. It almost seems like a trap that the legislature put this possibility, this opportunity before them, allowed it to be voted on, and then once it's in place, slam that trap shut.
And look what happened in Humboldt County. The Sheriff's Department up there set up a grow program. You register with us.
Sure, tag each individual plant.
We tag the plants, you harvest it, we guarantee that none of it's illegal, and the Fed shut that down.
And even the cops were objecting to that. They didn't have any problems with violence or any of that going on because people had a means of control.
It's crazy. But I also, wait a minute, here's something that's good.
Okay.
The country of Kenya, Africa.
Right.
Now, Africans, let's face it, they're so far behind modern society.
In many ways, but in some ways. But go ahead.
Most society sees it that way. But yet, these Kenyans, they have enough intelligence to do a needle exchange program. To cut HIV, cut hepatitis.
You know, that same year when they passed that law that says it's no longer necessary to arrest or jail anybody for weed, that was the same year the Texas legislature was trying to come up with a needle exchange program for this state. And they hemmed and hawed, and they finally said, well, we're going to do a test experiment, not for the whole state, but just we'll let San Antonio do it and see what happens. So they passed the law, and then the mayor of San Antonio says, not in my city. So once again...
Yes, let's let more people die and get sick, and let's...
share it with their families, and
a ton of money in health care.
It's, well, logic has nothing to do with it, my friend.
Well,
we know that.
The drug war is coming to an end. I mean, look at it. Washington State, Colorado, both have legalization on the ballot. You've got Rhode Island just signed a decrim. You've got New York's going to go medical. Mass is going medical. New Hampshire is expanding their laws. Maine is looking at legalization and they're drooling. I mean, that big national forest up there, they can't control it.
Right.
As soon as a state goes legal, my prediction, I think, that you're going to see South America, Central America, just go off the wall. Why are we dying down here to keep drugs out of your country when it's legal in your country to have them?
Well, Clay, look, what we really need to do is stop And just look at what we have before our eyes. Has the drug war ever reached any of its objective goals? No.
Well,
is there any? Now I don't want to talk about.
Drugs are cheaper. They're more plentiful.
More freely available to our children than ever before.
Right.
So
they're
maybe
unregulated.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. They are regulated in schools. They back up that dump truck of crystal meth stuff that they give to the kids.
Come on. Now, I guess what I'm wanting to say is, honest to God, there is no legitimate reason to go down this path another inch.
There isn't.
But we have people. I was listening online the other day to the New York State Assembly talking about a medical marijuana bill. Yay and nay, yay and nay. All the people standing up, object. I can't tell you the number of times that the objections were completely negated. People had the truth, the evidence, the references to clear that objection. And not 5 minutes later, someone else would get up and repeat the same BS as if the thought had not been refuted. And this is the mindset of those we work with. They are addicted to drug war.
Yes.
Plain and simple.
Oh.
Yeah.
It creates jobs. I mean, now we take the prison industry and make it a part of our national product.
Yeah. You know, Bob, I'm looking at this story here. It's talking about Florida did not save money by drug testing welfare recipients. And I would imagine that in some cases you run into some of these people that are on welfare that have fallen that far off the ladder, so to speak, and you know, maybe have a history. Oh, we have a caller. Let's take that and we'll come back to that thought.
Caller, you there?
Yes. I have a comment, and I'd like to see what you guys think about it.
Sure.
From an economical point of view, I was speaking to a supervisor, and he was saying that there are a lot of qualified applicants who apply for jobs, but they can't pass the random drug test for marijuana. But now, if marijuana was legal, wouldn't the economy certainly take a boost on the upward turn because they wouldn't be tested for that drug, it wouldn't be illegal, and more people would be employable?
Oh, very astoundingly good point. Thank you, sir. In fact, let me share something with you. Two stories. One, I was doing contract work. I went to Anadarko Petroleum, went to the hiring agency one morning. Everything went fine. Yeah, great, you're going to do a good job. Oh, but you got to go take a urine test. I had smoked that morning. I went and took the urine test. I had 215 parts per billion, which is like 15 times over the limit. Another time I was working, because I worked there, I won't say the name, major oil company right here downtown. Working contract, been there about 3 months. They said, Dean, we want to hire you. You're great. We want you to write a book on these solutions you're providing. Okay, great, but you got to go take the urine test. This time I only had 25 parts per billion. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that my talent was recognized. They were wanting to hire me, despite the fact that I had smoked pot in the last 24 hours. And yet, because I had smoked, they could not hire me. The second one, I got fired about a month later when the test results came through. I had been hired, made permanent. But about a month later, the word came through. They kicked me out of the building. But within the week, someone else in that company called me back and hired me again part-time. It's a government hoax designed to keep employers in line with their dictates.
Yeah, well, I deal with people who've failed drug tests and do alcohol drug education with them. I believe that there are certain jobs that prohibit use of chemicals. Example, anything to deal with transportation.
Sure.
Department DOT, that's definitely a stringent thing. But if you're doing other things that might not require that, the impairment like driving, maybe something where you are doing more paperwork and stuff like that, I could see how that would not be needing the drug test. But I do know that companies over the past 20 years have been coming down very hard on people with drug tests. People like
every every aircraft mission over Iraq,
Yes.
Afghanistan, at night, every single one of those pilots takes crystal meth to stay awake for that
Well, the equivalent. They take disoxins, methamphetamine, hydrochloride. They do indeed.
Yeah, it's crystal meth.
Well,
any way you cut it, it's still the same drug. It's the same damn drug.
It's not going to have the contaminant BS.
It's still the same damn drug.
Okay, the disoxin's better for you than the crystal meth. I know.
But you know, we feed it to certain people. If you're studying to become a doctor, a lawyer, PhDs, they all use crystal meth to enhance their learning abilities.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
Not by that name, but
right.
The clock on the wall tells me we got to take another break here. You are watching Drugs, Crime, Politics. I'm Dean, Clay, and Scuba Bob. We'll be right back. Hope to take more of your calls.
And next time that you
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, infidels. My name is Aslan. Many years passed since we, the Taliban, destroyed your towers in New York City. You started a war against us, the Talibans, but you could not uproot us. And you know why? Because we have the opium. The United Nations says Afghanistan produced the 90% of the world's heroin supply. The United Nations says Afghanistan produced the 90% of the world's heroin supply. We buy the opium for $300 from the Afghan farmers, but we can sell it for $16,000 US to the European traffickers. From that money, we can buy weapons against the great Satan USA. We have to say thanks to the United Nations for keeping illegal the opium. Do you understand? Drug prohibition is a great thing, makes us rich and allow us to buy guns. Thanks to the United Nations, thanks to the prohibition.
I'm Susie Laux with HMS, and you're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
Falsifying warrants.
Okay. Welcome back to this edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We just got a few minutes left here, and I kind of wanted to bring up something with you, Bob. I was an alcoholic, big-time alcoholic. A lot of dang beer went down this throat back when. But now 27 years ago, I quit drinking.
Okay.
But I substitute cannabis, marijuana, tiny amounts every day because it helps relieve or get rid of that compulsion to chug that Budweiser or that Coors. How much of that comes into drug treatment? Is there a substitution? Are you able to work within that, trying to redesign a person's?
Well, again, that is a good question, because it's one of the issues I've got. Whenever you take a drug or you take alcohol out of a person's life and don't put anything back, it destroys the free the will of the person. They begin to
feeling robbed.
Right.
Yeah.
And typically they'll end up going back and even going back harder or worse. And that's one of the reasons why through my program, A Road to Success, I try to give the individual a chance to see what success is like. Right now I'm working with an individual who is using this K2, the spice, the legalized marijuana, which has got horrible side effects and is not healthy at all for people. And what I've done is I've got this individual turned around and turned on to the fact that now he can create a company. He's a brilliant individual when it comes to creating computers. And so what I'm doing is I'm helping motivate him to be successful at that.
Right.
And each little success that he gets stimulates that part of the brain that says, hey, I like this. This feels good.
Right.
And other people have used other things to, the marijuana. We have people going to their psychiatrist and getting their Valiums and other types of drugs and everything.
Yeah.
People go to food, and there's a lot of different things that they do. And I think it's important that we do provide a healthy alternative for these individuals, giving them a chance to learn how to reach success and be somewhere, to overcome these obstacles that have prevented them from being successful.
Right. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
We are.
Just got to get out of the way of ourselves. That's it. Yeah. I think about the investment of time that we got a call, I think. Let's see. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, well, when you're talking about drug substitution for addicts,
yes, sir.
What happens in most Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous meetings are people drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes.
Lots of smoke in the room,
yes.
You bet.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Substitution. Drug substitution.
Yeah. Well, in my case, when I quit 27 years ago, I went to AA. I found great simpatico, if you will, hearing the other people's horrible stories, and some of them worse than mine, which said, well, maybe I don't want to...
It's not so bad after all.
Maybe I don't want to fall that far down the hole. Maybe I can stop. And it did help me to stop, but I think I attended steady for 3 months, and then about the 6-month mark, I happened to mention that I was using cannabis as a substitute, and they told me, well, we can't have that here. And that was my last meeting, which seems a shame, doesn't it, caller?
Yes. Well, there is a book by a gentleman who, once again, had a very terrible, I forgot his name. He's had a terrible alcohol problem, and he wrote a book called The Pot Plan, in that he basically says, I met him at a normal meeting, a national normal meeting, and he was just adamant about the fact that he was a hopeless alcoholic until he did a marijuana substitution program for himself.
Yeah, I know that guy. I have interviewed him on my radio show. I can't think of his name at the moment, but yeah, a rather thick blue cover on that book, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
he was adamant. His life was in utter misery. He was hopeless until he was able to substitute it. And I know people who do this. I've known people that have substituted marijuana, small amounts of marijuana, to basically deal with their cravings.
Well, we appreciate the call. We really do. We got a couple minutes left here. Bob, any closing thoughts about your services, or maybe a website you'd want to share?
Well, you can always go to a-road-2to-success.com, and there I've got several programs that you can look at, and I'm in the process of, I've got several books I've written on things like stress management, success-oriented programs, dealing with kids, dealing with drugs, things of that nature. Again, I think that the key to rehabilitation is providing people with a road to success. I think that they need to see that they can be successful. They need to then generate the natural chemicals in the brain that makes them crave that success and not the drug.
Right. Yeah. It is... You can substitute substitute for a lot of drugs with success.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it helps to you know, compel the craving, so to speak. The success kind of eliminates a lot of those cravings.
Right. And I think parents need to look at that too when they're working with kids. Understand kids are going to have drugs, sex, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
Bottom line, that's been going on for eons of time.
It's going to happen.
We need to understand that. We need to be listening parents and understanding parents and being able to work with the kids to help them create a foundation of success.
Bob, to underscore, to support what you're saying there, that it is going to happen. You're going to have that rebelliousness. You're going to have that sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's going to happen. And it's not that often. But when it happens, it's such a horrible thing that parents turn their kids in, thinking that will teach them a lesson, that somehow the arrest, the jail, the stigma will help them. When the truth be told, the cops want nothing better than to begin that file on that kid and to send him, you know, on his way to the jail.
Yeah. And I've not seen anybody benefit from jail.
No, it's just not good.
Speaking of benefiting from jail, what about this guy in Florida that the feds he went to prison for 30 years. He came out, he's off of paper.
Oh, Robert Platshorn, yes, sir.
Yes.
Author of the Black...
Last night I was listening to your program. Tell us about him a little more.
Well, Robert Platshorn was a dope importer and seller, bringing stuff from Colombia and Panama, selling it through Florida and Georgia. He got busted. He went to prison for 30 years, got out about a year and a half ago. He started this, what he calls the Silver Tour, where they go to nursing homes, retirement homes. They talk to the seniors, trying to educate them to change that part of the vote, you know, to get some bills passed that you know, makes sense. Well, he's had great success with it, but now, even though he has a document from the Florida Bureau of Prisons saying you are no longer under supervision of the Florida Bureau of Prisons, he came home from a tour he was on in California to find his parole officer, even though he didn't know he had one, saying he's got to stop doing what he's doing, which is speaking the truth about marijuana, which is traveling, and more importantly, with hanging out with our good friend, Mr. Irvin Rosenfeld, a gentleman who gets 300 pre-rolled marijuana cigarettes from the federal government every 28 days. Irv tours with him on the Silver Tour. So that's shut down. He has no source of income, and he's trying to find out what's next in his life. But that's the current story of Robert Platts.
Is it the state or the feds?
It's the state. But I'm sure the feds, look, it's the powers that be. It's the drug war monsters. It's the ones who want this thing to last forever. They're going to do any and everything possible to make this drug war last forever, even if it means demeaning or destroying lives. And that's really what it's all about. We got less than a minute. Bob, real quick, your website?
A Road to Success, put a dash in between each word.
Okay. All right. And Clay, any closing thoughts? A couple seconds?
Let's just hope that Colorado, with the 60% in favor of legalization, happens in November, and it'll start to end this war.
Yeah, folks, it's been going on nigh unto 100 years, has no basis in reality. It's really waiting for you to recognize the futility of this madness and to do your part to help bring it to an end. Please check out my website, drugtruth.net. Hundreds of shows from experts all around the country. And please join us next time here on Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We'll share the truth with you.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories and you.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. You end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all of them.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.